tonight is somewhat of a historical night. We've got the UFC that is actually on what we would consider a network. ESPN obviously has always been considered one of the networks, even though it's not a major network like an ABC or an NBC or whatever. Those guys just televised the weigh-in for the Liddell Jackson fight, and they also had a piece prior to that with Joe Rogan and Lou DiBella. This is huge, I think, and I've been talking about this for a long time. When are the networks, when are the recognized networks going to get on board, and when are they going to recognize a sport that all of us have recognized and embraced, but they've held it off a little bit? What do you think this finally does for not just the sport, but to the networks? I mean, what is their next move now?
I think it gives a great deal of exposure, and not that MMA needed exposure, but I think it gives it recognizable exposure to your average sporting fan. And I think this is for the first time, an average sporting fan is going to get an opportunity to see the skill level that's displayed in MMA. And I'm glad that it happened this way. I think that the future of MMA is great. I think the future of boxing is great, but it's always, competition is always good.
Right.
And that's why here on Beatdown we got boxing and MMA.
Absolutely. Man. Well, one of the things that shocked me more than anything was I did anticipate this was eventually going to happen. You, myself, and Adam have been talking about this on Beatdown TV. However, I wasn't expecting it this quickly, and I wasn't really expecting it to be this involved. In other words, the Lou DiBella, Joe Rogan interview lasted for quite a while, and it was a really good interview. I was impressed with how much time ESPN devoted to it before going into the weigh-in. So, I mean, I really see ESPN diving into it feet first and saying, we're doing this thing come hell or high water. What do you think their next step is going to be? Do you think they'll ever carry a fight? Do you think that now they'll be including UFC or any other mixed martial arts in their SportsCenter broadcast? What do you think their next move is?
Well, it's interesting that ESPN has been venturing off into more boxing and now bringing on mixed martial arts. And I really don't know how involved they're going to get, because ESPN right now has the whole cow for the lack of expression. You got the NFL, you got the NBA.
That's right.
You don't need many more other things to, on your plate. But looking at it like it is, I think that ESPN will try some venture of some sort and give mixed martial arts an opportunity to, come into the living rooms of their audience. And it's going to be brilliant to see how that unfolds. Like you said, you had been talking about it, and I think you've been the catalyst on this thing, banging this thing. Hey, man, when is ESPN going to jump on board? And, you mentioned Rogan and my man Lou DiBella, Sweet Lou, keep it up, Sweet Lou. Anyway, man, they had a heated discussion, talking about the differences in the sports.
That's right.
Let me ask you, what's your opinion on that? Because you've talked about it, a lot. I mean, and, you know how I feel. We both kind of have some of the same feelings towards it. It's a totally different animal altogether. But
right.
Hearing both Lou and Joe today, what did you take from that?
Well, I see Lou still doesn't want to embrace MMA, clearly, and never will. I mean, there's clearly I don't know if it's a front or what, but Lou doesn't want MMA to infringe on what he's doing in boxing, clearly. Joe Rogan, on the other hand, I felt like he voiced more of his opinion on the fact that he is a boxing fan. He let everybody know, hey, I'm not just a mixed martial arts guy. I've got DVDs in the closet of boxing, and he named some old boxers. He's apparently a big fan of Roberto Duran, and he named some of those guys. So I felt like Joe had more of a platform to speak his piece, since he was somewhat unbiased, even though we clearly know he's leaning towards MMA because that's who signs his paycheck at the end of the day, where DiBella had no interest in MMA whatsoever. So it probably wasn't the two best guys competing in a conversation with one another. However, it was entertaining. Now, as far as the overall for what they are actually doing in the sport right now, I think that this is huge for MMA. However, I don't think that the other networks are going to do a whole lot right now. I think they're going to sit back and watch this and go, okay, who is really going to grasp this? I've always said there's two stigmas that mixed martial arts have always fought with. The first one is it was associated with wrestling for so long. The outcome, we know what the outcome is. That's the first stigma.
Right.
Okay, I think everybody's beyond that. I think most people realize there's no way you can stage what these guys are doing. It's not a ketchup packet when they punch each other in the head.
Yeah.
The second one is that it's such a brutal sport. Well,
the brutality,
We've talked about it. It's really not any more brutal than boxing. The ground and pound looks brutal because you can use elbows and things like that. but it's really not that brutal. I mean, we've talked about, you've mentioned before, how you get so much more leverage hitting a guy standing up.
Right.
Well, both sports do that. In fact, boxing is all standing up, punching a guy. So theoretically, you could say that it's more brutal with boxing because all they do is stand up and land punches where they can rotate their hips and hit each other. The ground and pound, you don't have the leverage from the waist down. You're just hitting from here on up. So in my opinion, you see a little more blood because elbows tend to cut the eye and things like that. But let's face it, if you couldn't use elbows and some of the other things, there'd be no more blood than a boxing match.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. As we talk about boxing and mixed martial arts, the parallels and similarities between the two and the differences between the two, I really, with Beatdown, we do both, of course. We cover both because we are in the best of both worlds. But, I don't think I think people are over-exaggerating the fact that there's a difference. Both of them are competing. I don't even think they're competing for the same audience.
I totally agree with you.
And we talked about that time and time again. This is two different audience totally that watch both sports. And you have some guys like us that are just purists that can appreciate the best in both worlds. But I don't think it's going to be the unwritten rule like in soccer. If you love soccer, you can't watch American football.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And it is a big difference because most soccer fans don't watch football.
Absolutely.
And most American football fans don't care about soccer too much, So, but I don't think it's that much of a difference between the sports. And I do think at one point in time, here in the next 5 or 6 years, we're going to start to see these sports continue to flourish. Boxing is doing great things in the last couple of months or so in trying to restore the glory and the history. And MMA has a lot of young, talented fighters. And that talent pool is going to last. It's going to be, it's going to give them longevity. And I think they're going to be around for several years to come.
Well, just before we close, to mention the talent pool you're talking about, I saw where 45-year-old Ray Mercer is going to be fighting his first ever MMA event up in Atlantic City later on in July.
Yeah. Well, that would be dwindling down
Absolutely.
in talent,